Hello and welcome to the first ever Boxing Daily podcast. We will settle on a different name, but we'll get into that in a bit. Firstly, I just want to introduce myself. My name's Jordan Ellis. I'm a sports writer, so I cover boxing and MMA. I'm currently the site manager at boxingdaily.com and also at Low Kick MMA. Today, I'm joined by Keelin McNamara. How's it going, Keelin?
Jordan, how you doing, mate? I'm very happy to be here. What's up, guys? As you just heard, my name's Keelin McNamara. I'm also a sports writer. I cover MMA and I also cover boxing for Jordan at Low Kick MMA, and I'm very happy to be here.
Good. So, as I just said, is that we currently don't have a name. We've been getting them in. We put it out on social media the other day. And first things first on the agenda, let's try and settle on a name. So, okay, I've got a few written down. I think Keelan's got a few written down. So, the ones that in front of me right now are Punch Drunk, The Standing Eight, and Punch Cast. Have you got anything to add in, Keelan?
Yeah, those are all very good suggestions. One that I actually got, and it's very funny because I literally got it at the latest possible point last night, was the 13th round, which I actually do kind of like. You know, it makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense. It's a throwback to the old days of the 70s and the 80s when we had 15 rounds of fighting. So I kind of like that. I think that adds a different dimension personally.
Yeah, that's a cool one. The thing what I'm doing with all these names is the first thing I do is I put them into Google, and the
Yeah.
13th round's a cool name, but it's almost too cool where I thought someone else has already got that. So I look back and someone had it in 2017, but I'm sure they wouldn't mind if we stole that one right now. So they're the four we've got. Maybe we'll put it out to a vote. For right now, it's the unnamed. Obviously, the Boxing Daily podcast is an okay name, but we're not doing this daily, so it makes no sense. So what we'll
Yeah.
do, we'll gather the best four, we'll put them out on social media and see what the people say. Until then, it's the Boxing Daily show, it's the Boxing Daily podcast, and yeah, we'll just crack on with it.
Sounds good.
So first things first, I just want to speak about the fights from the weekend, and did you get to see them all?
I did, yeah. I was actually watching the Lewis Ritson Ponce fight. What a fight it was, by the way. Massive credit to both guys. Absolutely amazing show. Very disappointed for Lewis Ritson. Obviously, it was a final eliminator for the IBF lightweight title, I think. And yeah, I mean, very few guys deserve a title fight more than Lewis Ritson. He's a warrior. You know, he's pretty much fought everybody that he can, and he's come out the other side. But Jeremias Ponce was just on a different level. You know, he is such a good fighter, fighting out of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And he just looked really, really good. He caught him with a shot. Lewis Ritson went down, caught him with another shot. And after the second shot, really was when I realized Ritson just wasn't going to come back into it. But that's no knocking Lewis Ritson. Lewis Ritson's an unbelievable fighter. Jeremias Ponce was just on his game on Saturday night, but what a fight it was.
Yeah, it was a brilliant fight start to finish, and Ritson he's cleaned out domestic level, and now he's trying to make that jump up until the world stage, and it just hasn't quite gone his way yet. But he's only 27. He's got a lot to offer, and he's obviously a very tough guy. It's just um, I think even pre-fight, I didn't fancy him just for the fact that I heard Eddie Hearn saying that if he wins this fight, he doesn't feel confident going in there with Josh Taylor, and that's who he would have, had a mandatory shot against. So it doesn't fill you with confidence when the fight is not filled with confidence. Ever since he's made that jump in weight, he doesn't seem to hold the same power, and I think
Yeah.
that showed on fight night. I think Ponce just had a bit too much for him, and really his power, that was his get out of jail free card, really landing that one shot, but he just didn't seem to be able to hurt him. And I'm sure he'll be back. He's got a big following in Newcastle. He'll always sell shows out. It's just, can he make that jump? And I'm never one to write off a young talent. He's 27. He's got so much time ahead of him, and he's also already achieved so much. So we can never write these guys off. There was one particular moment that stood out. It's getting coverage everywhere, and it was the towel went in. What round was it? And
Seven, I think, 7 or 8.
7 or 8, the towel went in from his dad of all people. His dad threw the towel in. The referee, Steve Gray, throws it out. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring it up because it's a very interesting point. Obviously, as you said, it's the point that's getting the most coverage. Look, boxing's a difficult sport, especially when your father's in your corner. He has a bond to his fighter the way no other trainer can. And, of course, the father has a vested interest in seeing his son's okay. Anybody would. I can kind of understand the referee's perspective, though, because from what I understand, a referee doesn't have to stop the fight when the towel goes in. It's under his perspective more than anybody else's. And if you were looking at it as a legal case, there is case law to support the referee and that the referee was right. There was that fight a good few years ago now. I can't remember which fight it was, but I'm sure you'll know the fight I'm talking about, where the corner threw the towel in, the ref threw it back out, and the fighter who was losing ended up knocking his opponent out. So there is always that puncher's chance, and I can understand the referee's perspective on it. You've got to give the fighter every chance that they can because they can still pull it out of the bag. One punch changes everything in boxing. But with this scenario, I can kind of understand the criticism. Lewis Ritson was getting lit up. It seemed incredibly unlikely he was going to mount a comeback. He was getting swarmed with every shot by Hermias Ponce. So again, it's a bit of a gray area, but if I had to lean towards one side, I can understand the criticism of it. If I was the ref, I probably would have stopped the fight around earlier.
Well, we both cover MMA, and one of my pet peeves about MMA is they don't throw the corner in. It's never the towel coming in from the corner. Sorry, so
Yeah,
that's a pet peeve of mine, and I like to see it in boxing. Obviously, sometimes we do get early stoppages, but I think an early stoppage is better than a late one. And for me, it should have been over, especially when it's his dad. And his dad, he's his coach, he's his dad. He knows his fighter, he knows his son. How much can he take? And he didn't want to see him take any more. So I would have preferred that to be called off. But then,
yeah.
as you said, it's a grey area because we've seen it last year when Deontay Wilder's corner threw in the towel. That's become a big thing. Like Deontay Wilder's saying, this guy's a cheat. He's working for Fury's camp. He's doing this. He's doing that. The referee comes into question then, and it does create something of an issue for the referee where how much does he take from this towel? How important are the corner? But all being well, I think Lewis Ritten's fine. The referee went over and explained to the team why he threw the towel out. So I'd look forward to hearing what he had to say, but it seemed to go down well with Ritten's camp, and it was all it was all sorted. So no harm done, but it was a weird one to see, and I think one of the things boxing's got over MMA right now is that the corners are able to intervene and have more of a say, and don't let the fighters take too much punishment. And at that point, the referees just went, no, I'm going to let it go. So very interesting thing. I do think Ritson was done, and I think that I was right to go in it. But thankfully, it didn't last too much longer, and thankfully, he didn't take too much damage.
Yeah, I fully agree with everything you've just said, mate. One of the things I've always loved about boxing is that the corner, because the corner knows their fighter better than any of us do, and they can kill the fight whenever they need to, because again, they know their fighter. And it's funny because as you just said, we both cover mixed martial arts just as much as we cover boxing, and we saw this exact thing on Saturday night. For people who don't follow the UFC or mixed martial arts in Arizona, Paul Craig was fighting Jamahal Hill, and we saw this with the armbar from Paul Craig. He dislocated Jamahal Hill's shoulder, and the ref kept going, and the corner couldn't step in because the corner wanted the fight to be stopped, and the referee only stopped the fight 30 seconds too late. If that was a more severe scenario, something much worse could have happened to Jamahal Hill. And if that had been applied in boxing, God knows what we could have seen from Lewis Ritson. So I do agree, boxing definitely has that advantage at the moment. I like the fact that the corner can stop the fight and throw the towel in. And the Wilder example is a good one to use as well. Boxers are very proud people. They talk themselves up and they believe that they're the best in the world at what they do, especially with Wilder Fury 2, but I won't get into that. Wilder was getting beat up, and he was getting beat up bad, and it's good that the corner can look at a fight from a different perspective and stop the fight when the fighter's too proud to. I don't like this rhetoric personally of fighters saying, I'm willing to die, I'm willing to go out in my shield, because we don't want to see that, and we shouldn't have to see that. And the truth is, if that fight had got on another round or two, we would have been talking about serious brain damage for Deontay Wilder. So I think all credit to his corner in that fight, especially for having the courage to do what needed to be done. And the fact that we have that mechanism in boxing is a very, very good thing.
Yeah, and it is, just to be clear, it is there in MMA. It just doesn't get used. I think there's and it's the corners clearly look out for the fighters in boxing, and obviously Lewis Ritson done that. And yeah, we can just be thankful that nothing too bad happened. And I'd love to see, obviously we don't see it, but love to see these referees come out and explain the decisions, explain why he did what he did, and then it would all, it'd all be fine. But right now, it's just a big question mark over the fight, and we'll move on, because I'm sure we could spend all day, talking what
Of
happened
course.
there. What we'll get onto is Shakur Stevenson, one of the brightest prospects in the sport. He fought on the weekend. We won't speak too much about it because it was pretty uneventful. It was a pretty much a shutout, but he was very hesitant to throw because his opponent had power, and he was very aware of that. He got some criticism from the broadcast team. I think it was Timothy Bradley. What did you make of that fight?
Yeah, it was a great fight. As you said, Shakur Stevenson is one of the brightest young prospects. He's a former Olympian, and I think he fought a very good fight. It perhaps wasn't the most exciting fight. It's not going to be an Instagram highlight for years to come, but he did what he needed to do. He knocked down his opponent, I think, in the fourth round with a check hook, and he pretty much rode on from there, doing what he needed to do, managed the distance, changed levels when he needed to. And like I said, it wasn't the most beautiful boxing artistry performance we've ever seen, but it was effective. And to be a champion in this sport, you have to be effective when you need to be. And I think Shakur Stevenson showed what he needed to show. I agree with Timothy Bradley. He should have boxed a little bit more, and he could have thrown some more hands for sure. But you can't argue with the decision, and you can't argue with the result. He's 16-0, and he's pragmatic. And sometimes you just do need that.
Yeah, and so they all can't be, beauties. They can't every sometimes just getting the results. That guy was obviously a banana skin. You get through it, move on to the next one, and then the next one can be you can be a highlight reel finish. It can be a big one for you. I do understand. He's a young star and he wants to become a star. He wants to be, at the level of some of these guys who we're going to speak about. Lopez, Teofimo Lopez. We're going to speak about him in a minute. He's a huge star. He's a huge star because he's got that punching power, and he really got after it in his last fight against Lomachenko. So I understand the criticism, but as we said, he's young. It was a very, very clear win, a very big win. So there's not too much negatives to take out of that performance. It was a good win, and Stevenson moves on.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I said, his record's still intact, 16-0, and it's on to the next one from him.
And we'll move on to this week's fights because we've got a few coming up, but obviously the biggest one is Teofimo Lopez against George Kambosos Jr. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this is a very good fight. Kambosos is a top contender in that division, and I think stylistically he will provide a great fight for Teofimo Lopez. That being said, I cannot tell you how impressed I was with Teofimo Lopez against Lomachenko. I'm sure we'll discuss that more later on, but Lopez was so good. His footwork was incredible. His punching power was present. His jab was very neat. He pushed the pace. He managed the pace very well. And that's a real problem for anybody who fights Teofimo Lopez. In Vasily Lomachenko's professional career, I can't remember a fight where anybody has actually stepped to Lomachenko and tried to control the pace. Everybody's always been happy to let him dictate the pace, him lead the dance, and then try and counter punch off of that, which you just can't do. Teofimo Lopez went in tough. He went in to manage the pace. He went in to set his own agenda. And he did that so well over 12 rounds. And if Lomachenko cleaned out the lightweight division before, to have a fighter who can do that to the king is going to be very difficult for anybody who has to face him. And, George Kambosos is going to have a very difficult fight this week because Lopez looks like he could beat anybody. And if he fights even 60% as well as he did against Lomachenko, he's going to be a nightmare to try and unbox.
Absolutely, and it's a tough one because Lopez is so young, so I do feel like he could potentially still have that, a blip. He could just have a bad night, a
Yeah.
bit of off form, and Kambosos could get him. I think both men are predicting early finishes, so I'd be excited to see how it goes. But I think we're going to get a 12-round fight. I think Kambosos is tough. I think he'll hang in there, but I think Lopez, as you said, he'll have a bit too much quality, and it'll show as the rounds progress. But great fight, and it's on a Triller pay-per-view. So Lopez is a top-ranked guy. I think he's just extended his deal with Top Rank, but there was a bit of an issue there which allowed Triller to step in and make a big bid for this fight. So I just want to touch on them. What do you make of Triller's entry into boxing, and is it good for the sport?
Yeah, man, I'm not a fan of Triller. I'm not gonna lie. I understand everybody's issue with traditional media and traditional boxing. Don't get me wrong. My issue isn't on that side. Guys like Sky Sports and so on and so forth, they've had issues with their broadcasting, charging murderous amounts of money for fans to be able to enjoy their sport. But I don't think Triller's the right way to go about it personally. We've seen these celebrity boxing matches, which believe me, I have my own opinion on. And I don't think they're good for the sport. Having a musical concert in between fights is not a fight. A fight card's about professionalism. It's about going in there, seeing the best of the best and appreciating that. And one of my biggest issues with Triller is the commentary. I have a really, really deep gripe with the commentary. Guys like Oscar De La Hoya, who are ridiculously disrespectful to the fighters in commentary. I am not a fan of it at all. I think it cheapens the sport, and I think it draws people away from the sport because they're looking at this circus act. And people are looking at boxing saying, boxing's meant to be the pinnacle of combat sports. Why is Oscar De La Hoya acting like an idiot in commentary and disrespecting the fighters? Like Frank Mir, obviously UFC legend, fought Steve Cunningham on the last big celebrity boxing card. And all De La Hoya did was talk complete rubbish about Frank Mir for all 6 rounds or whatever it was. So personally, I don't like Triller. I'm not a fan of it. I think the Zone is probably a better alternative to Triller in terms of new media, but I don't think Triller's the right way to go about it. I think they have a lot of controversy around themselves. They're trying to do the Dana White tactic of going after streamers, which you're just never gonna do. Just accept it. This is the way the world is now. And I don't think they present themselves very well at all, if I'm honest. But that's just my 2 cents. If I was Lopez, I would be looking to be on, one of the bigger broadcasters like Sky or DAZN. But yeah, that's my opinion. I'm not a big Triller fan.
Me neither. Obviously, I love having these new guys enter the media because there is issues with boxing, I think. But in my opinion, the issue with boxing is there's too much fluff. There's a lot of like space between fights. There's a lot of dead
Yes.
air. There's a lot of even the national anthems. I hate that. I don't understand that why it's in the sport. So what Triller have done, they've put even more fluff in between it. So we've got musical acts. We've got slap fighting. They've made it worse. They've took the worst parts of boxing and just made it even worse. With it. I do prefer the Zone because what they've done, you brought pretty much end to pay per view. Besides the big fights, I don't think we're going to get much pay per view in the UK anymore. Hopefully, and they've done a good job, and I do think I feel so bad for these Americans because every week they're shelling out 60 to 100 bucks on these fights which aren't really worth it, and they talk about why are people streaming and why because no one wants to pay that type of money for that type of fight. So hopefully we get the Netflix of boxing, the Netflix of sports, and that's the way we go, and everyone can afford it. So yeah, I don't like Triller. I'm these celebrity boxing fights, I'm happy to see them go over to Showtime because Showtime, they're not going to entertain all this stuff. It's going to be fights, even if it's not a top level fight. It's going to be a real fight, and they're not going to have all this fluff in between it. So think what you want of Logan and Jake Paul and them type of guys. At least the other week when we watched that Mayweather fight, we didn't have to watch about 3 hours of absolute just absolute patient before the actual fight. So I think that's the one thing you can take away from it. But it'll be interesting to see the route they go because this time this is a real boxing fight. This is Teofimo Lopez, one of the pound for pound best fights in the world. Undisputed champion, maybe we'll get into that in a minute, against George Kambosos, who's a serious contender, a mandatory challenger, just be Lee Selby, so he's legit. Will they still go that route? Will they still do the, the circus act, or will they be a bit more serious this time? It's interesting to watch, and I think they need to, pick the lane, because if they want to go the circus route, it can last within a year they'll be out of business. If they want to be serious and actually cover boxing, there's room for them. They just need to do it properly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you've just made. There is an opening in the boxing market, and especially the wider combat sports market, for marketing it professionally and doing a just as good, if not better, of a job as traditional media. But I think that is just such a great point. And it's a point I was actually thinking of myself. When it comes to boxing, you have to decide how you present it. If you want to do this circus act and follow these YouTube boxers, that's fine. Because if people are willing to pay for it, then you may as well provide the market for it, I guess. But you will go out of business within a year, 18 months if you're lucky, because this thing has a finite life cycle and it will die out on itself. That being said, if you want to actually get professional commentators, someone like Bernard Hopkins would be amazing. If you get a professional commentary team and you actually clean up your act and you present it properly, you can become a legitimate alternative to the mainstream boxing media. You can almost become the counterculture that new fans go to in order to get their boxing fix. Because like you said, I do feel really sorry for Americans because they get absolutely murdered on the pay-per-view prices they have to pay. And that goes back to the whole structure of boxing, and that's a whole different conversation. But if you want to become a serious counterculture alternative, that opportunity's there. Don't get me wrong, there really is a niche for it there, as you said, but Triller have to work out what they are as an entity, and they have to try and forge their own identity and work out what they want to appeal to, because celebrity boxing and fickle fans will die out within a year. I agree with that, and more importantly, I hope that's the case. But if you want to become a legitimate alternative, it's there. It is there. And if they can market Teofimo Lopez right, they could take the first step towards being that.
Well, that's the problem. They've created a deal with Lopez, who, as we've just said, YouTube boxing won't be there in a year or two. Teofimo or Lopez is going to be around for 10 years. He's the guy, and they've created a contract with him, and they could have potentially said, we'll offer you alternatives to your top rank deal. We'll bring you here full time and actually make a serious commitment. But that hasn't been the case. They seem to be in it, for quick paydays. And it's seen by the fact that Lopez hasn't signed with them. He's extended his deal with Top Rank, but we won't get on it for too long. But it is an interesting, subset to this fight. They've coming in, they're making a noise. There's lots of money clearly on show. They took one of the biggest fighters away from ESPN, one of the biggest platforms. What can they do with it? How successful will they be? And how different will it look to, the Jake Paul fights and things like this? Because Jake Paul fighting is a circus, isn't he? He's not a fighter. He's fighting non-fighters on top of that. So this is a real fight, a real boxing card. I really hope they do it justice, because I don't want Teofimo Lopez sitting around while people are slapping each other in the face and doing all this stuff, and Pete Davidson's running around, and just it's not great for the sport, and it's we're going the opposite direction. Boxing needs to make changes, but these are not the changes. And we'll move on now, because we've got a few more fights to get into first. But just before that, I want to have a little, well, it might be a yes or no answer. It might be a bit more complex. I think it's more complex. Is Teofimo Lopez the undisputed champion at lightweight? What do you think?
I think yes. I do agree it's a complicated question because he doesn't hold the WBC belt, but realistically, he's beaten. It kind of goes back to the very old argument of lineal champion versus who holds all four belts and which one you give more weight to. Obviously, a lot of fighters hold both, but in this scenario, that's the argument we come back to. I think Teofimo Lopez is the undisputed king because he beat the undisputed king of the lightweight division in Vasily Lomachenko, the guy nobody thought could be beaten, the guy who looked untouchable, and Teofimo Lopez did it. So he deserves to be recognized as the undisputed king in my eyes because he beat the king, and that is what boxing comes down to. It's like what Ric Flair said in pro wrestling in the 80s, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And Teofimo Lopez beat the man by logic and by succession. That makes him the man of the lightweight division. So I agree there's more complexities to the argument, but to me, Teofimo Lopez is number one.
See, for me, I agree with what you're saying, but I can't get away from the fact that he doesn't have that WBC belt. He's got the diamond, and I just don't think it's like, basically the reason he's got the diamond is because Lomachenko relinquished his belt or was elevated to a different status to avoid a fight with Devin Haney. And it's not necessarily because he thinks Devin Haney's going to beat him or anything like that. It's just because he didn't fancy the fight. He wanted this Lopez fight instead. But and although Haney won it, he got it by email and all these things. It puts asterisks on it for me, and I think there's still work to be done. I think for me, the way to win it is to win it clean and to go about your business by beating everyone. The way we've seen Josh Taylor do it, the way we've seen Usyk do it. I think there's it's as impressive as it is beating one man. Unless he's got all the belts, I don't think you can call yourself undisputed. So it's such a shame because I think the WBC have cost us an undisputed fight by doing this, because no one's going to recognize this belt. I think obviously the one thing we don't need in boxing is more belts. So the fact that they've done this, and it seems like a way to get around the rules now, doesn't it? Because the whole talk about this belt is so you have this belt and you don't have to do mandatory challenges. And I think that was the plan for Deontay Wilder if he got by Tyson Fury. They do not want to fight Dillian Whyte. I know you can say he's a good fighter, a bad fighter. They're just not interested in fighting Dillian Whyte for whatever reason. And they were going to elevate him as well. So if you don't have to fight mandatories, are you a true champion? That's the whole essence of boxing, fair play, these type of things. So although this guy might not have the biggest name, he is the mandatory challenger. He deserves a shot. If George Kambosos was not mandatory, he wouldn't get that shot. So what do IBF do? Do IBF to say, oh, we'll create a different belt so Lopez can avoid that? So I do get bogged down in that. And I think that is ultimately, I think Lopez should get the undisputed claim just because he's beat the best guy, but I don't think he can on a technicality just because that WC belt is not worth anything. Basically, at that point, by accepting that, Lomachenko has relinquished his belt and he doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's another excellent point, and it's something that really, really irritates me in modern boxing. And I think it's a big reason why boxing's losing so many fans too. This shit with multiple belts with organizations is ridiculous, and it needs to stop. And I'm serious, it does need to stop. The WBC are manufacturing a new belt every other week, and it is stupid. We've got the Mayan belt, we have the diamond belt, we have the gold belt, we have the silver belt, we've got the franchise belt, which is the most ridiculous monopolizing thing I've ever seen in my life. Like you've said, taking up franchise status basically means you're a guaranteed champion and you can never lose your belt. What kind of rubbish is that? That goes against everything boxing's ever stood for. Boxing is by being a champion and beating the best of the best and earning your right to be number one and to be the best in the world. This notion that you can be given a belt that you never have to defend is insulting, frankly, to the legacy of all the greats who've gone before. And it's insulting to the fans because the fans aren't that stupid. The fans know what you're trying to do. You're trying to ensure revenue and you're trying to ensure that you get as much money from fights by making sure there's a title on the line. But now there is no title because you're giving guys titles that they never have to defend again. And that's just ridiculous. Like you said with Wilder, he was going to be given franchise status if he beat Fury to avoid Dillian White. By the way, that's another criminal scenario that's been happening for the last 2 years, but that's a different conversation. This notion of WBC franchise status is ridiculous. And as for the WBA, you can't judge anybody either. This regular champion, super champion, 3 belts per division you have now, it's absolute nonsense. I mean, back in the day, we used to have at the most, like, we're talking about Mike Tyson, 1987, 3 belts per division, which was still too much, but it was a little bit better because at least you didn't have variants of belts. But this notion of like regular champion, super champion, unified champion, Mayan champion, diamond champion, it's absolutely insane. And I basically where I'm going with this is I'm bringing it back to your point about Lopez. And it's a point I can't argue with, and it's a point I won't argue with because it's a very valid point. I think Teofimo Lopez has been done dirty by the WBC because if Lomachenko hadn't relinquished his title, he would have fought for it. And if he'd have fought for it, he would have been undisputed. We'd have been talking about a different scenario. So the sanctioning bodies really have to get their act together because they're depriving us of these big fights and they're creating new belts, like you said, to get around the rules. And it's just not right. People are being deprived of the best fights and fighters are being deprived of the best opportunities.
Yeah, and there was a big moment a few weeks ago where I think we could have had 2 fighters really taking a stand against these organizations, and Joshua and Fury could have just said, "Let's bail all these belts. We'll keep the Ring magazine," and the winner of that will be like he won't be technically undisputed, but he will be recognized as the best heavyweight on the planet. Everyone makes a bunch of money. Deontay Wilder, there's a chance to say, Deontay Wilder, you're not getting 20 million. I'm not going to fight you. You can go and fight Andy Ruiz for this WBC belt or some other lesser name, and we're going to go off and make 150 million. But that's not the case. And I do think there's the people around Tyson Fury have misled him and us and the fans and Eddie Hearn and Joshua. And it's just been a massive waste of time. So this is the problem, and obviously we can speak about this all day, but I do obviously there's too many belts and we need to fix it because Teofimo Lopez probably should be the undisputed champion. He should be getting that type of credit, but now we're speaking about is he, isn't he? What credit does he wear? How do we judge him? Rather than just speaking about how great he is and how much of a brilliant performance he put on last time. I think he's 23 years old. So yeah, we'll leave that there because obviously, as we said, we could speak about it all day, and there's actually better things to speak about this week because we've got a few
Thank God.
really good fights coming up as well. We've got Inoue, we've got Charlo, we've got Munguia. What do you make of these matchups, and how do you see them going?
Oh dear Lord, these are great fights, and they're fights that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Naoya Inoue's nickname is the Monster, and for very, very good reason. Man's a 3-weight world champion. He's the unified bantamweight champion. He holds the WBA super title, the IBF, and the ring. He's held that since July 2019, and he faces a really tough test in Michael Das Marinas. And that's going to be a really good fight. Das Marinas is the latest in a very, very long and distinguished line of tough, gritty Filipino fighters. And it's going to be an insane fight. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I think Inoue is going to have enough to get the job done. I just think he is a class act as a fighter. The punching power he has is insane. His boxing ability is just so good. He can manage a fight when he needs to. And I can see Inoue getting the decision or a late stoppage in that one personally. Then we have Jamal Charlo and Juan Macias Montiel, another very good fight. Obviously, Charlo, WBC middleweight champion, 31-0. Montiel from Mexico, 22-4-2 with 22 KOs. That's in the Toyota Center in Houston, I believe. That's going to be a very good fight. Jamal Charlo, I rate very highly. I think he's a great boxer. I think he brings real power, and I see him getting a stoppage around the 7th or the 8th round in that one. I just think he's going to have a bit too much for Macias Montiel. And then we go to Jaime Munguia against Camille Serramata, which is another very good fight. Jaime Munguia is the only fighter to stop Charlo's opponent, Montiel. He's 36-0, 29 KOs, insane record. and he's facing Zarameta, who got beat by Gennady Golovkin in his last fight. And I think that's a very good middleweight eliminator there too. I think Munguia is going to have a bit too much for Zarameta there. Munguia's got ridiculous punching power. I mean, look at that, 36-0, 29 of them are knockouts. So I see a sixth round knockout for Jaime Munguia in that fight. And that's just my take on this week's fights, and they're all brilliant.
Yeah, and it's always great to see a new in action, because for me,
Oh,
he's one of the pound for pound best fighters. He's brilliant. And last time out, he didn't have it all his own way. He had a tough one, and we're so used to, it's scary seeing, he is a monster, because it's scary seeing one of these lighter guys absolutely just wiping everyone out, and some clean knockouts and some scary ones too. So always exciting to see him. I am a bit disappointed in Charlo's opponent, as you said. Munguia has always knocked him out in 2017, so I feel like Munguia is still a prospect. He's in around that mix, but he's still a young contender in my eyes. So I don't think Jamal Charlo, I think in his 30s, should be fighting these people. But he's struggling with the fact that the majority of the middleweights are over with DAZN and Eddie Hearn and Golden Boy and them type of people. So I expect all three to come through looking clean. I think Jamie Munguia he's still young. I feel like he's got a blip in him, and he just needs to I think he was quite lucky to get through Hogan a few fights ago.
yeah.
So very, very interested to see how they all play out. But I expect big performance from them all. But I would never put a slip up past any of these guys, especially Munguia. I still think he's young, he's still learning, and if the fight he's in with is good enough, there could be something there. But besides that, I expect Charlo and Inoue to come through looking good as pair, and probably Munguia too.
Yeah, I agree with you. Munguia, even a decision, I wouldn't be surprised with, because he can struggle during mid-flow in some of his fights. So I think that's a very good point from you for sure. And Inoue and Charlo, I would expect to get the job done, not comfortably, because combat sports is never comfortable, but relatively comfortably. I think they'll look good, and I think they'll both just have a bit too much for their opponents. But I like the point about Charlo as well. I agree the politics is probably holding him up, but he needs to step up now in terms of his opponents, because he's fighting these younger contenders when he really should be fighting the elite of the elite. I'd actually like to see Charlo fight Golovkin next for the IBF belt. I think that would be an amazing fight. But yeah, I'm sticking with my predictions, and I agree with yours as well.
So we'll move on to some news. That's all the fights done. So first thing first, we seen this week that the heavyweight former champion, I think he had the WBA, is Alexander Povetkin. He's retired following his KO defeat to Dillian White. Right, what do you think that's the right call?
Yeah, I think it is. First of all, very happy retirement to Povetkin. Amazing heavyweight. I feel a very underrated heavyweight. I always think he was rock solid. He was always in the top 10, perennial challenger, and just a really good fighter. And he only ever lost to the best of his division, really. He lost to Joshua. No shame in that. Joshua's a great fighter. He lost to Dillian White. Dillian White's one of my favorite heavyweights out there. And he was just always a great heavyweight. Like you said, he held the WBA belt during his career, which is very good. Managed to knock out Dillian White and technically become interim WBC champion, which was an unbelievable upset and an amazing thing for him as well. But yeah, I think it's the right call. He's taken a lot of damage over his career. I think the Dillian White rematch did a lot of damage to him as well, because Dillian White hits like a bus anyway. So I think it's the right call. I think he's 41 now, if I'm not mistaken. He's in his 40s, and he's probably made a good amount of money in his career, and I think it's the right time as well. So Alexander Povetkin, very happy retirement to you, and thank you for all of the amazing fights.
Yeah, I think he's been a great heavyweight. Obviously, there's some controversy regarding his drug tests and things like that. How clean was he? But how clean is anyone in this sport? So I think even in his age, like as his age was going, you could tell he was getting he was becoming a lesser fighter. But despite that, he was still a live dog, and all his fights, even Anthony Joshua was getting pinged by him for a few rounds, and was getting hit. He still had the capability to beat to match someone who a lot of people consider the best heavyweight on the planet. So, and then he rallies to get that final KO against Dillian White, and it probably would have been cool for him if he went out just with that KO, and if he could feel that he win, because obviously he got battered for the majority of that fight, and but I'm sure the payday was just too much to turn down, and he walks away with a chunk of money in his pocket, and a world title and a fight with Klitschko, and I think Klitschko's the only one who's handily dealt him, and that just goes to show how good Klitschko was, is that he was able to outpoint Povetkin pretty easily in comparison to the other fighters he's been in. So yeah, great career, and wish him all the best.
Olympic gold medalist as well. Just to add, a lot of people forget that too. He has an Olympic gold medal too. So yeah, very, very good career.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's had a brilliant career. It's just been unfortunate. He's been undersized, and he's come into the era where the Giants do rule, and Klitschko has been replaced by Fury and Joshua. And he's not the biggest, tallest guy. He punches hard and he's a tough guy, but I think sometimes size does matter, and especially at heavyweight. He's just been unfortunate that he's run into guys who are going to go down as Hall of Famers, legends, things like that. So a brilliant career nonetheless, and to get a world title despite everything, well done to that man. Moving on, we've got the Matchroom Fight Camp, which I'm always excited about. It's not it's not the biggest star-studded event, but it's some nice one for us UK fans. It's really some nice fights we're going to get in there. And did you see the lineup?
I did, yes. I've seen a very good amount of the lineup actually, and I like what I've seen. I think this was a very, very good idea by Eddie Hearn. Obviously, it was born out of necessity, but I really like the intimacy of it. It feels like an old school sort of fight camp where people just get together and they get to see who's the best. I really like the idea of it. I think it's an accidental, brilliant niche, actually. Conor Ben's fighting Adrian Granades. Amazing KO over Vargas in Ben's last fight. Ben really looks like he's starting to turn the corner and evolve as a fighter, and I think he's going to keep getting better. Campbell Hatton, one of my favorite fighters to watch. Obviously, I was a huge Ricky Hatton fan growing up, so to see his son turning pro is an amazing thing. He looked good in his last fight, and one other fighter who's on there. These are just the fights that stand out to me at the moment. Shannon Courtenay's back. She put on an unbelievable fight against Ebony Bridges last time out. Obviously, that fight got a lot of coverage, and she's actually a very, very good fighter. So I'm excited to see who she fights next. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to Fight Camp 2. Fight Camp 1 was brilliant. We got White Povetkin as part of that, and some other unbelievable fights. And I'm really looking forward to Fight Camp 2. Great idea by Eddie Hearn. I cannot wait to see it. And like you said, it's a really big bonus for us UK fans as well, because we get to see something that we're not up till 6 a.m. for.
Yeah, and I really like the way they bring Conor Ben along. I think at the start of his career, I think there was a lot of naysayers saying he's only coming off his dad's name. He didn't have much amateur pedigree at all, and he looked a bit raw, and he didn't look as strong as he does now. 18 fights in, but this is a tough test. Granados, I think Danny Garcia is potentially the only one I remember stopping him. He's had some tough fights with good people, and I think Eddie Hearn's doing a really good job with Conor Ben, allowing him to build a star. And I think Conor Ben is probably the next pay-per-view star. If he's able to get through this, maybe another one. He's got it all. The way he speaks, the way he acts, he's very heart on the sleeve type character. He goes in, he starches Sammy Vargas and was what was meant to be a tough test. So I really like him, as you said. Shannon Courtenay's on the card. A bit of a weird one. Andy Yildirim's on the card. He's fighting Jack Cullen. So Yildirim's just coming off that loss to Canelo. So I think Jack Cullen's got a really big chance to get a name on his record and potentially do something Canelo did even quicker. Anthony Fowler's on there. Then week 2, we've got Kid Galahad against Jazza Dickens rematching, which is a great fight. Ebony Bridges is on that one, and then after that, Joshua Buatsi. For me, he coming out of the Olympics, he was the brightest prospect of them all, and it's slowed down a little bit lately. So I'm looking forward to seeing him step it up maybe and get into world title contention by the end of this year. But yeah, I love the idea, as you said, and I just love the way they market it. Well, they've done it like a festival type theme, and I think there's obviously, as we said, these aren't pay-per-view fights. These aren't, the biggest fights ever, but they're really fun for us UK fans. And as you said, we don't have to stay up all night to watch them.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. It's like a Glastonbury of fighting, which is amazing. And yeah, I love the point you made about Connor Benn at the very beginning. You try following Nigel Benn's legacy and see how far it gets you. The man's one of the best British middleweight fighters there has ever been. I'd actually, if it ever unfolded, I'd love to see Nigel Benn against Chris Eubank Jr. just because of the legacy. I think that'd be an unbelievable fight to see. But yeah, Ben really looks like he's evolving as a fighter. I think Hearn man manages very well, and I think he's doing that perfectly with Connor Ben too. Vargas, even though Ben kind of almost discredited it by being as good as he was, Vargas really was a step up in competition and Ben blew him away. So Ben is definitely, in my opinion, the next pay-per-view star to come out of the UK. Like you said, he talks well. He's very, very marketable. He's emotional, but in a good way. He's open, he's relatable, he's likable. So I think Hearn's doing a great job, and I think he's doing a great job with Connor Ben too.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Hearn and Matchroom. They've signed a deal with DAZN to be their global partner, ending a 25-year relationship with Sky Sports. What do you make of that one?
Yeah, this is a very interesting piece of news that obviously broke last week or the week before. And to be honest with you, I really think Sky only have themselves to blame in this. Eddie Hearn's provided such a stream of talent for Sky Sports box office and Sky Sports boxing for like nearly a decade now, I think. And the truth is, Sky have just damaged themselves and have shot themselves in the foot, as far as I'm concerned. I actually have it here. When you choose a circus like Mayweather Paul over a homegrown fighter like Josh Taylor becoming the undisputed champion, as far as I'm concerned, that's unforgivable because you've compromised a homegrown undisputed boxing champion over a circus. And the truth is, I understand it's all about money, and Hearn's probably getting a ridiculous amount of money for him and his fighters. But I do think that was a big reason for the move to DAZN as well. Sky just have not presented this well at all. They've been their partner with Matchroom, like you said, for 25 years, and they've just stagnated. They haven't moved on beyond what Matchroom has been giving them. And the fact that they've delved into this circus menagerie of YouTube boxing, I think has really damaged them severely. And I think this move away from Matchroom is going to hurt them and it's going to make them bleed for sure. Because obviously, Sky's built around their UK audience, and the biggest UK fighters are going to Matchroom, Matchroom and DAZN. Joshua's leaving. Dillian White, I think, is leaving as well. They're two of the biggest fighters Eddie Hearn has. So the fact that they're going is going to severely, severely damage them, I do believe. And as far as I'm concerned with Sky, they kind of deserve everything they get. I can't think of an argument to sympathize with them losing Matchroom because, like I said, they haven't built anything beyond it. And this delve and down the rabbit hole of YouTube boxing, I think was sort of the nail in the coffin for them. Hearn's an unbelievable promoter. Hearn knows the new wave of media, and he knows DAZN is where it's at. Personally, I think if he'd have gotten a good offer, he would have stayed with Sky. But I think Sky dug their own graves with the YouTube boxing as well. Maybe that's naive on my part, but I think for a boxing purist like Eddie Hearn, that was a big reason as well.
I think the problem with Sky is Eddie wants to take it to a next level, and they're just not prepared to do it. So what
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of subpar products taken to pay-per-view simply because Eddie Hearn cannot afford to pay Dylan White or Derek Chisora the money they want unless it's on pay-per-view. Whereas it's not a pay-per-view fight. We don't want to see Dylan White on pay-per-view unless he's fighting, Anthony Joshua or someone of that, type of stature. The same with Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora against Usyk should not be on pay-per-view, and it won't be on under DAZN. So I think that the problem is Sky Sports is so heavily invested in football, and you think boxing money's mad. Check out British football. It's crazy money, and I think they're just wasting all the money on the football. And and boxing is a side, a side product that they pump a little bit of money into. They have a little money spin off the pay-per-views. But I think I almost feel bad for him, where every time they put on one of these pay-per-view cards, he's got to come out and defend it, because it shouldn't be on pay-per-view, but it's still a good fight. Like, I wanted to watch Chisora against Usyk. I just want to pay £20 for it. It's the same with all these Dillian White fights. It's, certain people can be pay-per-view stars, and Anthony Joshua, if the zone opt to, put his bigger fights on pay-per-view, that is fine. He's such a massive star. Same with Tyson Fury. But there needs to be a cap. You need to be a superstar, and it just can't be anyone. And I think that's the problem Sky Sports have made for themselves. They can't afford the money to keep up with Eddie Hearn's progression, and that's why he's gone. And the zone will do that. They're going to back him, and we'll get a lot of good fights that you usually would pay £20 for, and we'll probably get it for, like, I think at the minute it's $1.99 per month on the zone. So, it's a big win for UK boxing fans, I think.
Yeah, I think what Eddie Hearn's doing is Eddie Hearn has evolved Matchroom so much so quickly that, like you said, Sky either just cannot or will not keep up with it. He's taken it to such a different level, and with the zone as well. What Eddie Hearn's so clever with too is he can say, I made boxing accessible for the fans again. Who can't afford $1.99 a month? It's perfect. It's marketing genius from Eddie Hearn once again. A lot of people dislike Eddie Hearn, and Eddie Hearn's never going to get the full credit that he absolutely deserves. But this is just genius on his part, the DAZN move. He doesn't have, like you said, and you're absolutely right, he doesn't have to justify fights anymore. He doesn't have to labor every point saying, this fight's on pay-per-view because. He can put on every fight that he wants now with fighters under his banner, and he can make all the great fights without having to labor the justification for it. So it's less work for Eddie Hearn. He's probably making more money from it, which quite frankly he deserves from everything he's been through for the last couple of years. And it's more accessible as well. For fight fans, like you said, Derek Chisora, Alexander Usyk is a 7 out of 10 fight. So it's a very good fight, but it's not a £20 fight. With DAZN, you are getting this fight, and you are getting every other amazing fight right now for $1.99 a month. It's perfect from Eddie Hearn. And what he's doing is he's almost evolving past Sky with the sort of old Henry Ford model. If you have something that's really cheap and millions of people can afford it, or something expensive that only a few 100,000 can afford, who's going to do the better economics? It's going to be Eddie Hearn. DAZN is genius. It makes so much sense for Eddie Hearn. And I think he has just evolved into such a level that Sky just will not put the money up to match it. Because, like you said, football is their baby. Football is pretty much Sky Sports. And Eddie Hearn's evolving beyond that, and he's moving into the new wave of media doing that. So Eddie Hearn, it makes every bit of sense for him. But Sky, I do think it's damaging personally.
And I don't think it's necessarily a massive risk to say it all goes tits up for Eddie Hearn and DAZN. I think he's still got a home at Sky Sports. He's got the darts and the snooker that do really well on there. The darts is becoming more and more popular, and they've still kept them ties with Sky Sports. So I think it has been amicable. He's left, and he's kind of left the door open. I do think, DAZN, I think a lot of people are expecting them to. They are coming in, making a splash, lots of money, lots of talk. But it is hard getting these big sports right. So right now they've got the boxing. I think to be successful in the UK, you do need the football or some type of football. Cricket, rugby, these type of sports. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But off the back of that, Sky Sports have immediately linked up with Top Rank, which I think is a good thing. But as we said, we don't all want to stay up till 6 a.m. in the morning. So they need a UK partner, and that's Boxer. So that, I think it used to be called Ultimate Boxer before. It's run by the youngest promoter in the UK. And I think they've gone for the Eddie Hearn type mold again, where we're going to put all our eggs in this young guy's basket. He's young, he's hungry, see what he can do. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't think it's an amazing idea. I think what they're losing in Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, they're not gaining back with Top Rank and Boxer. I think Top Rank are a very good promotion. You know, obviously that's Bob Arum's crowd, and you've got guys like Terence Crawford. So you are gaining world class talent. But the problem is, again, UK fans, obviously, there's not anything UK fans can do about it. Time zones are time zones, but UK fans like, you know, Saturday night 10 p.m. being able to watch Anthony Joshua, you know, without having to stay up till stupid o'clock in the morning. And yeah, Top Rank's a good move. I still don't think it's a perfect move. And your point about Boxer, I agree with as well. They're trying to get they're trying to get someone like Eddie Hearn, but when you get someone like Eddie Hearn, you're not getting Eddie Hearn. You're not getting the boxing acumen and the knowledge of Eddie Hearn. You're not getting the marketability of Eddie Hearn. I mean, the guy who runs Boxer is practically unknown. So are Sky willing to invest the money and the time in evolving Boxer and making it the next Matchroom? I don't think they are. They weren't even willing to front the money to keep Matchroom. So I really don't see them investing enough money to keep this going either. And as well as that, I can see Bob Arum being a massive pain in the ass for Sky Sports to deal with as well. You know, Bob Arum is I don't even think he's necessarily a good, difficult negotiator. I just think he's difficult. I think he's blunt. I think he's tough to work with. Whereas Eddie Hearn, obviously, his father, Barry Hearn, worked with Sky for 25 years. Hearn was able to do deals with Sky pretty much every other day if he wanted to. So I don't think it's a bad move at all. You know, Top Rank is still one of the best promotions in boxing, but I think they lose more than they're gaining.
Absolutely. And then just finally, we'll pick on it on that Top Rank. We've got the fight presser. I think it's today, Fury Wilder 3. It's the fight we didn't want, but it's the fight we're getting. And just want to hear your opinion on what might happen today at this press conference. I feel like they've got something to sell now. We might see, these two guys clashing again.
Well, what I'd like to see and what I'd hope to see is Fury actually getting some criticism that he deserves, because this isn't the fight that we wanted and it's not the fight we deserve. But like you said, it's the fight we're getting, so it is what it is. I'd expect Deontay Wilder to come out, make some excuses about his ridiculous superhero costume from the second fight, how that's the reason he lost. It was 40 pounds, whatever. We're going to see Fury talking himself up, saying he knocked him out the first time, which he deserved. You know, Fury's going to say that he's going to just absolutely beat the break. Wilder's going to say till this day he's still the best heavyweight. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to see what anything different we're going to see from the second press conference. It's going to be a circus. It's going to be a menagerie of madness. And it's going to be probably Fury calling Wilder a dosser again.
Yeah, and it's just not what we want to see. And they're going
No.
to try and sell it. It's obviously there's a lot of negative press about this fight. I think, Fury had everyone in his corner. He's got a brilliant story, to come back from where he's come back from. But I think this time he's maybe he's underestimated how much the public want this fight and how much selling people on something that they're not going to get, could damage his reputation. So for me, there's no interest in this fight. There's no interest even in this presser, but I'm sure they're going to generate some type of, publicity. I don't be surprised to see if these two come, to start throwing bros later, because they've got a big job on to sell this. And I'm sure we were talking about it earlier where people don't want to pay these pay-per-view prices, and there is brilliant streams out there. I've seen them myself, although I don't use them. I've seen them myself, and yeah, so I don't think people are going to pay for this fight, and I think they've got a big sell job on. But Fury and Wilder are very capable of doing that. Yeah, and that can wrap us up right now, because we've been through a lot. We've talked a lot in the Boxing Daily unnamed podcast. First episode comes to an end. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been brilliant, mate. Thank you so much for having me on for number one. Long may this continue. The Boxing Daily unnamed official Boxing Daily podcast. It's been brilliant. I'm so happy with what we've covered, and on to the next one.
Yeah. We've got some good fights to look at this weekend. We'll speak about them next week. It'll probably, obviously, it's all rough right now, but it'll probably be Tuesdays each week. We'll cover some fights. and we'll speak about next week's ones as well. If there's nothing going on that week, we might just take a week off. We'll see how it plays out. We'll get this thing a name, and we'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks, Keelin, for joining me.
Not at all, Jordan. Thank you so much, mate, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks, guys.